All right, so it has been 14 years since the last time we got a new Final Destination movie. You guys remember Final Destination 5, right? The big bridge collapse, the return of Flight 180, the LASIK death, the gymnastics death, all that craziness. But yes, the time is finally here. Final Destination Bloodlines is out. So after all these years, how was the comeback for the franchise? Well, let's talk about it. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mad Blood, and welcome to movie number 6 in my Final Destination review series, the newest movie in the franchise, of course, called Final Destination Bloodlines. And yes, throughout this video, I will explain why they call it Bloodlines. And like I mentioned a second ago, it has been 14 years since the last Final Destination movie, which is a long time. So there are some things in this movie that definitely feel new and fresh and modern. The technology for some of the gore and the premonition stuff is a little bit better. I mean, they can kind of push the envelope forward a little bit more, like in that regard. And also immediately, just with the opening of this movie, it immediately feels different after all of these years because we're going way back in time. Now, I'm a big fan of the franchise for the most part. I mean, in Final Destination 4, we do get some fun deaths throughout that movie, but overall, that movie is pretty terrible. But especially the first 3 movies in this franchise have so much charm for me, so much early 2000s nostalgia for me. And yeah, I have all-time classic premonitions in those movies that without question scared a generation for a lifetime. I mean, come on, airplanes, roller coasters, tanning beds, logging trucks. The list goes on and on in those movies. I mean, you bastards, you had to do that to us, didn't you? And speaking of logging trucks, let's just say those fake logging trucks that they were driving throughout the United States to help market this movie weren't just used to pay homage to the premonition in that second movie. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. And on that note, I don't feel like dancing around the details of what happens in this movie is going to be the best way to talk about this movie. I want to talk about the deaths, like in detail, who died, how that all affects the movie. So just a heads up, there will be some spoilers in this video if you haven't seen the movie yet. And basically the premise of this one is we're following this college girl named Stephanie who has started just the past couple months having these nightmares, these brutal, bloody nightmares about her grandmother, Iris. And because of that, she's kind of failing out of school. She's lost touch with her family and is basically just ruining her life. So because of this, she goes back home to get some answers. Eventually, she tracks down her grandmother, Iris, who is still alive. She's living in this bunker in the woods. And then Iris eventually, during that whole moment, does end up dying. She basically does it on purpose, which starts this chain reaction of everybody in Iris's bloodline starts dying. Death is coming for them based off of, just oldest to youngest, essentially, which is the same thing that happened to a lot of the people from the premonition because there were so many people that survived that it took a long time for death to basically check them off of death's list. And a lot of the people ended up having kids and grandkids and whatnot, which then ended up putting all of them on death's list as well. And obviously, Stephanie wants to prevent all of that from happening. She doesn't want her cousins to start dying. She doesn't want her siblings to start dying. She doesn't want herself to start dying. So, unfortunately for her, her grandmother, Iris, is basically an expert on the subject because she's been at her bunker away in the woods defeating death all these decades, like I mentioned just a second ago. And now, just before she dies, gives her like her Bible on how to like foresee death, spot the clues, all that kind of stuff. And then we basically just watch throughout this movie how all of that unfolds and how the clues connect to the opening premonition. And we also get some twists along the way. People who thought they were in the bloodline and they were next to die ends up being that they weren't actually in the bloodline. We also get twists along the way towards the back half of the movie as well, where people think that they defeated death. They got themselves out of this whole ordeal, but they didn't. And for the most part, I do think the twists and turns in this movie are pretty fun, especially the bloodline stuff. I will admit that did kind of catch me off guard. I did think that moment in the movie was pretty funny. The twist at the end, though, with Stephanie thinking that she defeated death and that whole thing, I don't know, that was a little bit predictable. I didn't think that was all that great, but I'll talk about that more in just a minute. So we start off here in 1968. We're with young Grandma Iris and her boyfriend, Paul. They're basically going off to celebrate this grand opening of this Skyview restaurant tower thing, which I guess is supposed to essentially be like the Space Needle in Seattle, but for whatever reason, they couldn't use that name. I'm sure for, lawsuit reasons or whatever have you, obviously, because of what goes down in this scene. You can imagine why, but Paul is basically planning on proposing once they get up there. Iris, though, hasn't told him yet that she's pregnant. And yeah, this is the opening premonition. And honestly, damn, what an opening premonition. Now, I don't think this opening premonition is quite on the level of like the premonition in the second movie or probably even the third movie. I'll probably have to go back and watch this movie a second time this weekend to really make my final decision on that. But at the moment, I'm kind of thinking this might be the third best premonition, in my opinion, in the entire franchise. And I know that premonition in the fifth movie is pretty damn good as well. But yeah, this one is really, really good. Also, just the anxiety, the buildup of everything, how it's all pulled off, how it's shot. It's a really, really good one. And also, is this opening the single reason that humanity basically stopped carrying around change in their pocket? Because this little shit here in the movie throws that penny off of the tower, which starts a chain reaction, causing so many people to die. Which, by the way, that little shit's death in this opening sequence, man, as soon as they cut to him leaving the tower, basically to safety, I started laughing out loud because I knew exactly what was coming. And bam, that little shit, when that piano fell on his head, just absolutely crushing him, I laughed once again. And this is one of those classic Final Destination premonition that just proves to you how great the Final Destination franchise is in a movie theater setting with a bunch of other people, because during this opening premonition, you are going to hear the oohs and ahs from the other people in the theater with you, the holy shits from them as well. And it's just great. And I've mentioned this before, and yes, we love the actual deaths in the Final Destination franchise, but one thing that was definitely lacking, especially from Final Destination 4, is just that classic Final Destination tension and buildup and anxiety before the deaths that just puts you on edge. And I think this opening premonition does a really good job with that. I mean, the floor is kind of slowly cracking below everybody as they're dancing to Shout, which, by the way, great song choice for a movie like this. It's got the whole like a little bit softer now and then a little bit louder now. It's like the pending like ebbs and flows of the anxiety of the moment also unfolding as the song unfolds. By the way, also the soundtrack in this movie, really damn good. I feel like a lot of the other Final Destination movies in this franchise have, some classic songs, of course, but also have a lot of generic songs. The soundtrack in this movie, though, top notch. Now, one gripe that I do have with this opening sequence in this massive tower is that to me, it's not quite as relatable as like the plane stuff in the first movie, the highway pileup in the second movie, or even the roller coaster in the third movie. It's kind of like, how many of us are going to be up in a tower like this with glass floors and stuff like that? I know they exist. They're out there, and a lot of us have done that before. I have as well. But it's just not quite something you're going to come across on a more regular basis and immediately think about Final Destination. Now, with that said, if you are scared shitless of heights like I am, I mean, this opening sequence, this premonition, clearly plays into that and how they shoot it and all of that. There's a lot of effective shots that make you, if you're scared of heights, I mean, it's going to make your knees definitely wobble a little bit. Speaking of just shots, just in general, I think this opening premonition is shot pretty damn brilliantly, especially that moment where half of the tower is about to fall over, but they don't show us that yet. They just give us little hints that it's starting to fall over, like things slowly starting to roll or fall over, and then it just kind of builds and builds and builds. I just think that's really effective. It also kind of in a weird way reminds me of the Titanic when the ship is like vertical and then it's going to split in half, how that's all pulled off as well, and that translates to some similar scenes in this movie. But Yeah, I just thought the way it was shot, very, very effective. But yeah, what a crazy opening premonition in the Final Destination franchise. The anxiety is pretty on point. The gore is definitely on point. And also bonus points because it feels pretty new and fresh as well, because we've never gone so far into the past before here like we are in the late 1960s. What's also unique about this opening premonition too is typically, obviously, when the main character dies in the premonition, you all of a sudden zoom out and it's that person's face, but that's not what happens here. It's unique because we then cut to Iris's granddaughter after the opening premonition. It kind of gave me that same feeling that I got when I watched the opening to Scream 6, when Ghostface makes the normal opening kill like Ghostface does, and then all of a sudden takes off the mask, which, yeah, could be a coincidence, but maybe not too, because Guy Busick, who helped write this movie, also helped write Scream 6. And after all of that, as we're meeting Stephanie and her family, I noticed right away that the cast in this movie is starting to feel very, very different than pretty much every other movie in this entire franchise. Typically in this franchise, yeah, you'll have one or two main characters in the movie that feel like normal people, but outside of those characters, you'll typically have somebody that's just like way over the top, like a frat guy or some weird cliche girl or something like that, but just characters that kind of seem like caricatures of normal humans. Whereas I feel like in this movie, throughout basically the entire movie, every single character felt like real people, like a real family, which personally I thought was really well done. Now, speaking of the cast, not only was it great to see Tony Todd returning in the franchise for his last and final movie, rest in peace, Tony Todd, the legend, great to see him back in this. By the way, that moment in the movie when they said Grandma Iris knew somebody named JB who works at this hospital, and then they figured out that they needed to go visit him, I immediately got hyped. But this movie also unveils Tony Todd's whole connection to everything basically in this franchise, which is something that I'm sure everybody who's been a fan of this franchise has really wondered about. I mean, there's a million theories and all kinds of stuff, but in this particular movie, they link it back that Tony Todd's character, who was the little boy that Iris saved in the premonition back in 1968. But probably my favorite character in this entire movie is Eric. He's the tattoo guy, a little bit more of an emo guy who's kind of like the black sheep of his family, which rightfully so, because Eric is the one in this movie who finds out as everything unfolds. His mom basically breaks it to him like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. The reason you didn't die is because your dad, who you thought was your dad, is not actually your dad. So you're not technically related through blood to Iris. But he's very similar to Ian from Final Destination 3, which are characters that I feel like are pretty perfect for a franchise like this. Like, they're very pessimistic, they're sarcastic, but they're also smart at the same time. And yeah, I just feel like Eric is great in this movie, and I honestly kind of feel like they fumbled the bag pretty big time killing off his character in this movie. It would have been great to see him in more Final Destination movies. I don't know, I kind of look at it a little bit like he's similar to Randy in the Scream franchise, which I also think was a big misstep killing off Randy in Scream 2. But still, with that said, I mean, they send him off in a pretty good way. His death is not only hilarious, but it's also a crazy one. This MRI machine in the hospital getting turned up all the way. Hell, if I know if that's even possible in a hospital, I would assume they have some sort of like protocols in place to make sure that doesn't happen. But his nipple piercings are pulling towards the MRI machine. His Prince Albert is coming in towards the MRI machine. And then he just happens to get in the way of the wheelchair, which just goes right through him, folds him in half. And like I said, it is definitely a memorable kill and a holy shit moment in the movie. And this movie's got some great death scenes. Honestly, some of the best death scenes in this entire franchise. And I've mentioned this before, but when the death scenes are a little bit more niche, that kind of lowers them a little bit just for me personally. But when they use things that we see almost every day in our everyday life against us, I think that adds a little something extra to those death scenes. Like in the franchise, we've seen stuff where they're using swimming pools against us, car washes, lawnmowers, just stuff like that. Adds a little something extra, and I think they do a great job of that in this movie. And yeah, for the second time in this franchise, they do have another lawnmower kill. I know the other one was a little bit different, just shooting out the rock, killing the mom outside of the hair salon, but In this one, though, great fake outs throughout this entire scene. And honestly, this scene got me. It kind of surprised me. My dumbass actually thought that this uncle could potentially make it out alive. I should have known better, though. I mean, they were clearly building his character to be like the nicest guy in the entire world. So then they could obviously take him out in an absolutely brutal way. But yeah, a really, really bloody kill. Like I said, great fake outs, anxiety in this entire scene. And it also plays off of that whole like family barbecue, just get together in your backyard that could go wrong. There's also a garbage truck kill in this movie, which honestly might be the best non-premonition death in this entire movie. The entire time, they're doing all these little fake outs with Eric, because up until that point, we're expecting Eric to be the next one to get killed. So they're faking us out, having all this good anxiety and stuff, and he's also being funny along the way. But blurry right behind him, all of the stuff that Stephanie thought was going to happen to him, bam, just happens to his sister behind him. Like I said, it's kind of blurry. She gets stuffed inside of the garbage truck. They're trying to stop this truck. And then at the very end of this death, man, the shot just lingers on his sister as she her head and arm and everything slowly gets crushed in this garbage truck as she's trying to get out of the back of this truck with Stephanie's help. It just happens all right in front of her. Definitely a memorable death in this movie. And honestly, one of the most memorable deaths probably in this entire franchise. Oh, and by the way, speaking of Eric earlier in the movie at the tattoo shop, when all of y'all thought he was going to die in some crazy way because of that first teaser trailer that we got that I kind of shit on a little bit and said it was a bit of a letdown, and all of you in the comment section told me, oh, you're totally wrong, you're an idiot, it was amazing, he's going to die in some crazy way, I bet the whole building's going to catch on fire or something, the fan's going to fall on him. I want some apologies in the comment section. I was right. Guy didn't even die at all. A very fun scene, nonetheless. Was I maybe a little bit too harsh on that teaser trailer? Yes, I probably was in retrospect. But still, he didn't actually die. So at the end of the movie, after basically everybody in the family bloodlines has been massacred, the only ones left are Stephanie, her younger brother, and their mom, who has been estranged for them for like 10 years. Definitely seems related to everything going on with Iris and how Iris kind of, they feel like fell off the wagon a little, or just, was unhinged and kind of went crazy. But they figure, all right, we're going to take mom's decision, and she's going to go live out her days essentially in Grandma Iris's fortress that she had that was all built up to help her escape death in a sense. So basically, if mom just lives there, we'll all be fine because mom will be able to defeat death for all these years. And as long as mom doesn't die, then we won't die either. And to me, I feel like this whole big ending moment is kind of just okay. It's definitely not one of the best parts of the movie by any means. So they go to grandma's basically fortress. Mom eventually gets crushed by like a power line or something like that. I don't really remember, and then the sister Stephanie, eventually the RV falls over. She's in the water. And if you remember, Tony Todd reminds us in this movie. So in Final Destination 2, we find out basically that if you die, you flatline and then you're brought back to life. That's one way to defeat the whole thing about being on death's list. And the other way is to kill somebody so they take your place in death and you take their remaining years left, which we saw in Final Destination 5, basically kill or be killed. And like I mentioned just a second ago, basically out of sheer circumstance, Stephanie's RV that she's in, she happens to get her seatbelt gets broken in the whole mess of everything. So she can't get out of her seat. The RV falls over into some water. She eventually drowns, even though her brother is trying to save her. And then eventually her brother does revive her. And they think, okay, she died and I brought her back. So yeah, all is well, right? And for me, I always look forward to the flash forwards in the Final Destination franchise, not only because it's a fun little send-off at the end of the movie, but it also reminds you that, first of all, death does not believe in happy endings. And also, it just reminds you as well that no matter what you do, no matter what you survive, eventually, in the end, death will get all of us. And for me, I think in this whole fast forward sequence, I think the twist is fun. It's not necessarily shocking or mind-blowing or anything like that, but I think the way that it's all pulled off is done really, really well. So basically what's happening here is the brother is finally going off to prom. And Stephanie is hanging out there as well, just like, oh, you guys look so cute. All right, prom is going to be so fun. And then one of the dads comes over, introduces himself. He's a doctor, and he just basically tells Stephanie and her brother, like, oh, you weren't actually dead. You know that, right? And immediately Stephanie and her brother are like, oh, shit, really? Then boom, this train just derails and goes right for them. So you're kind of thinking, okay, they're probably just going to get ran over by this train in some sort of a brutal, bloody Final Destination kind of way. No, it seems like they get away from the train stops, and all is safe. Nope. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. The logs from the train pop out over the top of the train, just instantly crushing both of them one after the other, not only paying homage to the premonition in that second movie, of course, but I just feel like a really solid way to end with a bang in this movie and just immediately cut to the credits. Now, in the end, to me, I don't think this movie's the best movie in the franchise. First of all, it doesn't quite have that nostalgia or that early 2000s charm like the first three movies have for me personally. I also think this opening premonition, yes, is great, gory, and a hell of a lot of fun, but it's not quite as relatable, or it doesn't quite play off of some things that we see in our everyday life, like the premonition, especially from the second and the third movie, which kind of knocks this movie down a bit as well. Yes, I think the cast in this movie is really good. Everybody across the board does a great job. Very believable characters that feel real, like I said. But yeah, regardless, with that opening premonition, I mean, it's going to make me think next time I'm in a really tall building, especially if it has those see-through floors, I'm going to immediately think about this movie, which, yes, going into a building like that, I feel like is pretty rare, at least for me. But still, it's going to make me think about that, and there's something to be said about that. And really, though, all in all, I think Final Destination Bloodlines is definitely a very fun entry in the franchise. I mean, especially if you watch this movie on IMAX or some sort of a massive screen with great sound and great visuals overall, it's really, really going to work for you. I definitely recommend seeing this movie in a theater. Not only just that, like I mentioned earlier, just the oohs and ahs from the other people in the audience is great, and I just think it's a damn good time. And I feel like, unlike Final Destination 4, which is a movie that's just not good enough to convert non-Final Destination fans all of a sudden to just jump on the love train for this franchise, I do feel like this movie, A, has enough in it to satisfy current Final Destination fans without question. It has that foundation, that blueprint of the franchise. But I also feel like this movie, if maybe somebody was on the fence about the franchise or they're new to the franchise, I feel like this movie does have enough to convert people to become new fans of the franchise. But there you go, everybody. That is my review of Final Destination Bloodlines. First of all, I want to thank my Patreon supporters and my channel members. Thank you guys so much for the continued support. Really does help to keep the lights on around here. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. If you want some more videos from me right now, go ahead and check out one of these videos next to me. If you don't want to miss future videos on the channel, the best way to do that is to make sure you subscribe. Make sure, guys, you leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. Really does help the video out a lot. I really, really do appreciate that. But anyways, my social media links are down below in the description if you want to follow me over there. But again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. My name is Matt, and I will talk to you in the next one.